What's up guys, welcome to another video. Now today is a very special video because I'm going to give you 10 things that you can do right now without even leaving your house, because I'm stuck indoors today, it's raining, that will improve your flying. Sounds too good to be true, right? Is it? Let's find out. Alright, we're going to start off with something simple. Might be obvious to some, but to others it might not be, and it's even something that's caught me out in the past. Check your drone out. How does it look? Are all of your screws tightened? You should, when you're feeling your arms on your frame, how rigid are they? They should feel rigid as possible. There shouldn't be any movement. Make sure if you are getting any movements to tighten your screws. If you're still getting movement, maybe it's time to change your frame. If you've got any cracks in your carbon fiber, that might also be giving you jitters or something like that. So just make sure everything is fresh. I know my drone looks like crap actually, but it's actually in relatively good condition. And the one thing that I always make sure to do is to change to have fresh props like this. I make sure that every time I fly, if I bend or break a prop, I change it. And this is one of the most overlooked things for a lot of pilots. And you can even hear it when you fly with people. Sometimes when they take off, it's like that god-awful noise. I think some people underestimate just how important fresh props are to your flight performance. And I can feel it if I crash instantly. Maybe I've scuffed something, I lose power, and like I said, you can also hear it. So even though I'm not very anal about cleaning my drone, I am extremely anal about changing to always have fresh props. Now also, I want to talk about center of gravity. Let's just put our drone on our hand like this, and you kind of get it level. Which way does it fall? Mine is kind of balanced, and that's because my center of gravity is more or less in the middle. And I would say this is very important because if it's too far towards the back, and I've crashed many times, my lipo goes backwards, I can instantly feel a difference in flight performance. And that's because my back motors were having to work harder because there's too much weight at the back. So that's going to kind of change your pitch axis. So I would say just make sure that you've got your center of gravity in the center. If you've not used an action camera, move your lipo forwards a bit, and that should sort that out. But yeah, make sure everything's tightened, everything's in good condition. And if you are anal, unlike me, about the cleanliness of your drone, you can always check out RC Magic Cleaner. This stuff's amazing at cleaning drones. Definitely recommend checking it out. So the more mechanically kind of locked in good condition your quad is, the more locked in it's going to fly. So bear that in mind. The question I get asked all the time, what are your rates? And this is because I guess somebody's watched my video and they like the way that I fly it and they want to try something similar, I suppose. So they think by applying my rates, it's going to help them. And I would say, don't do this, especially if you're a newcomer to FPV. My rates in particular, they're like on some axis, they're over 1,100, which is way too high for a beginner, I would say. Definitely start with lower rates, maybe somewhere around 600 or something like that. Once you're more comfortable, move up. In terms of selecting rates, I would say the Superfly 5-inch preset is great because it has 3 different rate settings that you can also apply to your drone. So if you're a newcomer, maybe start with the slow ones. If you're slightly more experienced, maybe go for the medium ones. It really depends what you're trying to achieve. I would say if you are kind of newer and you're quite jittery at center stick, I would say definitely add more expo. I've seen some people recommend that you should use RC deadband, which kind of makes it sort of dead center stick. I'd say this isn't a good thing to do because it will create bad habits in the long run. If you want less sensitivity at center stick, just add more expo. In conclusion, don't copy your favorite pilot's rates. I would say if you're newer, start with something lower and then work up to it. On to the next one. So I'm definitely not an expert when it comes to tuning, in fact far from it. And in fact I use a preset in Betaflight. It's actually a slightly tweaked version, but I'll get into that in a bit. But as long as your drone, like mine here, is in good condition, aside from the mud, ignore that for now, then you shouldn't really have a problem using a preset, and that's a great starting point. However, this isn't just about telling you to use a preset to make you fly better. What about if I told you that you could get one of the Betaflight developers to personally tune your drone?
Don't play with me.
How crazy would that be? Well, actually, it's not that crazy, and it's a service that's offered by none other than the creator of Superfly Frames himself, and, in case you didn't know, one of the Betaflight developers. And for a very low fee, it's insanely cheap, he offers a one-on-one tuning service. You basically send in some black box logs, I think you do a bit of back and forth, and then he will give you a custom tune just for you in your drone. And I did this in the past because I was having a bit of problems when I was flying the prototype frame, and he looked at my black box, sorted it out immediately, and my drone just flew amazing. So if that is interesting to you, I mean, I would say that's pretty insane if I'm honest. I'm going to leave a link down in the description below, so if you want your drone tuned by the top pro, like one of the Betaflight devs, then check it out. So in my opinion, setting up your camera for optimal smoothness and quality is extremely important. And like I often speak about, I use the DJI Action 2. I think it's much better to set up your camera settings manually than to just put everything on auto. And I personally, as I also speak about a lot, I use an ND filter right there, and this allows me to lock my shutter at 1/60, which is quite a slow shutter speed. And the reason why I myself and many other pilots do this is because it allows your footage to look smoother, and also it will add motion blur, which has the added effect of making it look like you're going faster. If you have a high shutter speed, then it's going to capture all those micro jitters and stuff like that, and you might capture a lot of jello in your footage. So I'm going to put all my camera settings on screen at the moment. In terms of field of view, bear in mind that a wider field of view will make it look like you're traveling faster, whereas a narrower one will make it look like you're going slower. So if you're using stabilization in freestyle, just bear in mind that that's going to crop in your image slightly. So it's going to make your field of view look like it's slightly narrower, which will make it look like you're going slower. So if you're going for that kind of adrenaline fueled, speedy kind of footage, then using stabilization will take that away somewhat. So that's something to bear in mind. Generally speaking, I would say try and lock off all your settings, because it's more jarring, in my opinion anyway, when the exposure keeps changing, going lighter and darker and lighter and darker. It's better to just lock everything off for optimal viewing pleasure and quality. So this next one is actually a little bit boring, but it's something that I've done myself many times, and I think it will help you. So I want you to watch back your flying and tell me 2 or 3 things that you think are your strengths. And now watch it back again and tell me 2 or 3 things that you think you're not good at. So for example, it could be something like, maybe my strength is fast, juicy tricks, complicated combos, and hitting small gaps. But maybe I realise I'm not so good at proximity, power loops or split S, flying smooth, or flying backwards, for example. So the next thing I do before I go out, I write these things down on my phone, because I know when I get to that spot when I'm going to fly, I forget. And I get there and I'm like, oh, what was it I was supposed to work on again? Can't remember. Then I get home and I remember, and I'm like, oh, wish I'd remembered. So I write these things down on my phone so I don't forget. And then I practice only for at least like 1 or 2 packs. I practice only those things. So I'll practice doing my proximity flying next to things, and I will try to do as few minor corrections as possible. And also maybe I'll just do some packs where I'm just flying backwards in a long line, for example. It's helped me many times. It will make you a more rounded and complete pilot, instead of just being like a one-trick pony who's always doing the same things. So if you want to advance, you know, my advice is to do things like this. So another comment that I get all the time is commenting on how I'm using my thumbs to fly the way I do, like it's some surprising, crazy thing. And what people are talking about here is the fact that I control the sticks with my thumbs, not pinching. Because I think in FPV, when a lot of newcomers to FPV get into it, they just assume, I don't know, they watch videos, I don't know where it comes from, that you should be pinching your sticks. And this is the way to get the best precision, and this is the best method for every flight style. And I'm just here to say that that's not true. And I think that thumbs or pinching, or even using some crazy hybrid grip, can be beneficial to you if you're flying certain types of FPV freestyle. So for example, I would say if you're flying like a juicy style, very sort of reactive, and you're doing lots of fast flicks and tricks, that thumbing, in my opinion, is actually an advantage because your thumbs are able to react quicker than if you're just pinching. I'm sure there's going to be people disputing this in comments, but I'm telling you it's the truth, all right? If you want to get smoother, more refined movements, maybe you're like a flow pilot or something like that, then maybe pinching is better because you're not moving so fast and you're not moving the stick so much. Or maybe you're somewhere in between. You might want to try out a hybrid grip. You sort of, maybe you're thumbing and then you kind of rest your finger on top, and then maybe you can either thumb or pinch with the other stick. I think Pablo Flor, for example, has got a hybrid grip. Different things work for different people, and also we've all got different size controllers, different size sticks, different size hands, different finger dexterity and flexibility levels. So I would say if you're not happy with the way you're flying, why not try a different form of either pinching, thumbing, or using a hybrid grip? Might help you. So your flight style shouldn't only dictate the way that you hold your sticks. It should also dictate what gear you're using, because gear matters. So let's take, for example, say you're a flow pilot, you're not doing a lot of quick, fast movements like me. You don't need high KV motors like these. Same with your props, the size and the pitch, it makes a big difference. And weight as well, you might want to get more momentum if you're flying a flow style. So slightly heavier cord might be better. And then if you look at other styles like juicy styles, you definitely do need high KV motors to give you that immediate response, maybe medium to lower pitch props, and your lipos as well make a big difference. And if you're flying a flow style, you wouldn't need such a high C rating, 100 is probably more than enough. But if you're flying something where you need that kind of explosive movement, then your lipos do matter, and the gear does matter. And so that's why I have put a list together, which I'm going to put on screen now, which is kind of like a little guide as to the optimal gear that you could or should be using for your particular flight style. So hopefully that's going to help someone out. With that said, let's move on. So I spoke about pinching and thumbing and whatnot, but I didn't speak about the actual controller itself. And the controller that you're using, it matters. I would say pick a controller that matches your flight style, and whether or not you want to pinch or thumb, I think that matters too. But it's not just about that. It's also about stick tension, your stick ends, and even stick travel. What do I mean by all this? So firstly, let's get into it with stick tension. So the stick tension is sort of how tight your sticks feel really when you're moving them from left to right, up and down. I guess you could say that if you want smoother flight, that a tighter stick feel is probably better. And if you feel that your quad is a bit sort of loose in the air, you're moving it around too much, getting too many jitters, maybe you just need to tighten your sticks. And you can usually do this by sort of, I think you have to take the back of this and then you just screw it up and it will increase the tension. You can also change the springs inside your radios. I think I've got the default ones on here, but you can add tighter ones if you want that sort of tighter stick feel. And also, talking about sticks, I want to talk about the stick ends. And when I started, obviously when I first got this radio, I was using the default stick ends. And I found, because I was flying in hot weather a lot, and obviously when you fly FPV, sometimes you get nervous and your hands sweat. You're only human, especially when your adrenaline's pumping. And I found that my fingers were almost slipping off a little bit. So when I upgraded to these stick ends, which had sort of more pointy, spiky bits on the end, they stuck to the end of my finger a lot better. I'm not exaggerating, it instantly changed the way that my flying felt and it improved my control. To add to that, I also got sort of an extension so that I could make my stick longer, which I'm not using. And this might be good if you've got like really long fingers or something like that and you feel like your gimbals feel a bit too small. If you increase the length of your stick, it will actually give you a bit more stick travel, like the amount of time it takes for your stick to move from center to the edges, because it's longer, so you sort of have to move it further. And that could improve your sort of micro maneuvers, especially around center stick, and then it would take longer for you to get to the edge. So if you've got longer fingers, maybe consider using longer stick ends. That will also change your flight experience. Talking about stick travel, there's something called stick travel that I only learned recently. And this actually changes the endpoints on your sticks when you go to full stick. So for example, somebody told me recently, a pilot, that he had changed his pitch so that when he pitches down or back, when he gets to about 80%, that's full stick for him. But when he pitches forward, 100% is full stick. And that's because he said he found it harder to push the stick down than it was to push up. It made it easier and more comfortable for him by changing that within stick travel. And I know the AGO 2 gimbals, you can change every axis. I think on the AGO ones, maybe you can only change throttle and pitch. But something to consider, if that is an issue that you faced and you want to change the feel of your sticks, then you can customize them to whatever works best for you. So why not experiment? With that said, moving on. So another question I get asked all the time is, what's your FPV camera angle? And you can see here, I fly, boop, it's about 30 degrees. But if you're trying to fly maybe like me, for example, I don't know what, that must be why people ask me what my camera angle is. I would say it's not necessarily a good idea to just copy me or to copy what others are doing, because it entirely depends on your personal experience level in FPV. Like when I first started in FPV, I knew nothing, and I got my first quad, which was a 6-inch. I mean, who gets a 6-inch? That's just balmy. I don't know anyone who flies 6-inch drones. And I put my angle up to about 40 degrees. And I was going so fast, I had no control. I think on my first flight, I crashed straight into a bush of brambles, and it was just mental. And it wasn't until a bit later, until I learned a bit more about FPV, that I realized I should put my angle down. So maybe now you're like me when I first started and you don't realize these things. So if you're a newcomer, start with a lower camera angle, maybe something like 10 or 15 degrees. You're not going to be traveling forward so fast, and it's not going to be so overwhelming. It's not going to be so scary, and you're just going to get comfortable and used to flying FPV freestyle or whatever style you're flying. When you get more comfortable, then you can put it up a bit higher. But also, I'm going to say, don't underestimate the difference that a small change can make. Because I remember when I went up from 25 to 30 degrees, which is only an increase of 5 degrees, I couldn't believe how much difference it made, and everything just seemed to be going way faster, and it was kind of crazy because it was only 5 degrees. But the point I'm trying to make here is you should really set your FPV camera angle based on your experience level, not based on your favorite pilot or something like that. You really need to get used to flying FPV before you go crazy, and then later on you can experiment with things like angle, rates, setup, etc, etc. With that said, moving on. So in my opinion, the basis of all good FPV freestyle is good, you got it, good throttle control. Did you say that? If you said that, well done. And I believe this because this is what controls your altitude, your speed, how close you are to things. It's kind of the basis of everything, really. It's what gets you off the ground, literally. And so to improve your throttle control, I've put together some drills that you can do today in the simulator if you want. And I'm going to show you a few drills in my simulator that you can maybe copy that might help you. So let's just get into it. So I've got 3 drills for you today, starting with this one, a split S through a tight gap. The important thing with this one, you'll note that I'm going full throttle every single time I pass under the gap. So this will teach you how to control your drone when going full throttle through a tight gap, because for something like that you need throttle control. But just make sure every time that you do it, you go full throttle to catch yourself. So the next one is the flat yaw. I spoke about this in a recent video, but I do think this is really a great way to practice your throttle control and keeping your fingers or your thumbs steady. The important thing with this is to stay as close to the ground as possible, and then just yaw, and if you can actually do it under a gap like I'm doing here, and yaw left and right, both directions. And I believe this is a great drill to improve the steadiness of your fingers when controlling the throttle. Now the last one is also a high throttle drill, and it's just doing ejects over and over again. Try and stay as close to the ground as possible and just keep doing your ejects. So you pitch forward and throttle up at the same time. Make sure to try and keep your altitude as constant as possible. And if you do this drill enough, I believe that the eject is a great way to improve your throttle control, especially in extreme circumstances where you're having to change your throttle from low to high and vice versa. So those are 10 things that you can do right here, right now, today, that will improve your FPV flight experience. Similar to me, it's raining today, I can't go out, so maybe I'll do some of them too. But anyway, hopefully you learned something, hopefully you enjoyed the video. And one last thing, I get a lot of people messaging me, asking, sending me videos saying, what do you think of my flying? Is there anything I can do to improve? So it gave me an idea. What if I offered, in a similar fashion to how Steve, the Betaflight developer, offers a one-on-one tuning experience, what if I offered a one-on-one simulator session experience where we fly together in the sim and I'll give you tips on how to level up your freestyle. Maybe I'll watch you live and give you tips on how you can improve things, tricks, whatever it may be. Is that something that would interest any of you out there? If I get enough interest, maybe I'll start it up. But yeah, that's about it. That's all I've got to say today. And like I said, hopefully you enjoyed the video. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace!